So basically, we're talking about how can we, I mean, I heard that there's a lot of people from the construction industry here. And so the current period is a challenging time for all sectors. So financing is needed to jumpstart the economy and get many of the economic industries going. So this is an area I think that will be of interest to all of you. So to kind of kick off the presentation, I want to start with this image. This is actually last year I was in Dhaka in Bangladesh, and as you can see, as far as the eye can see, there's so many buildings and not much green cover. And I spent about 10 days in South Dhaka, and during that time I realized how bad life could get if there's unplanned urbanization. There's construction dust, which is affecting a lot of people's respiratory health. And there's heat island effect, meaning that there's so much heat there with these kind of concrete structures packed into a smaller area. So while I was there, I was really thinking how I was really glad about how Sri Lanka is at the moment. I mean, I know Bangladesh is one of the developing countries, but it has had high GDP growth. The fastest growing economy over the past 3 to 4 years has been Bangladesh. So the government is trying to take initiative to change the urban landscape. They are coming up with a LRT system, but still with all that, to change this kind of landscape, it will take decades. And during that time, a lot of people will suffer health consequences, and I mean, children and elderly will find it very difficult to live in this kind of environment. So we can't let that happen to Sri Lanka. And as you can see now on your right, you can see that the skyline of Sri Lanka suburbs, and there's already construction happening closer to each other. But thankfully, we still do have a lot of green cover. We still do have public spaces and parks, and these all, I mean, there is at least a system of building codes and land use regulations that keep unplanned development at check. So I will kind of, at the beginning of my presentation, I will, these might be all familiar to you, so I probably doesn't need reiterating, but I will still just kind of mention about some of the policies that are there in Sri Lanka on land use and building codes. Some of you might be even more knowledgeable on this than me and might be able to share more insights. Then I would go on to talk about government, because in the current context, government infrastructure is the government spending is an area where the economy can get again revived after post-COVID-19. So again, I will kind of discuss about the government, what are the kind of options that government has to borrow and start getting the economy going through construction and real estate development, and how that could be made more sustainable than the kind of government, the financing that the government is getting, how we could tap into sustainable finance options. Then I would go on to talk about the private sector, where will the demand come from the private sector on real estate, and also the kind of options that private sector has to tap into on sustainable financing. And then towards the end, I would talk about how what kind of collaborative models we can bring together, because as you can see, we can't afford to have Colombo or any of our cities be like Dhaka. I mean, we need to our forward trajectory should be one where we are having a healthy environment for all of us, and therefore it can't be done by one party alone. It can't be done by the government alone. It can't be done by the financial sector alone. We need to have the stakeholders coming in, especially all of you from the construction and real estate sector, as well as the young architects, the civil engineers, all of you need to come in together to make sure that our urbanization is more sustainable. So in Sri Lanka, last year in mid-June, we had a comprehensive national physical plan that was released. I'm sure many of you would have already seen this plan as well. But I really like the kind of, how we have put it together. And, there's been extensive research that has gone into this. And as you can see in the pink areas, the government hopes to concentrate all the urban development and infrastructure and physical constructions in the pink areas that you see in the map. And they also have allowed for forest regeneration and for agriculture, because many of the people rely on agriculture in Sri Lanka, and there is fragmented land makes it difficult for farmers to have scale and have a proper agricultural output. So the government plans to also kind of incentivize farmers to migrate into more closer communities and have residential scheme for the agricultural communities as well, so that much of the land could be released to for agriculture, as well as for the wildlife and regeneration of forests. There's also at the same time changes in the climate. As you know, the western province and the southwest is becoming increasingly wetter, and the north and east is increasingly becoming drier, and with far higher, wetter days, dry days in the north and east. So because of this, there has to be, in terms of providing water, in terms of providing electricity, it is best to have, rather than having a spread out infrastructure, there's a lot of benefit in having urban agglomeration, but it has to be done correctly. And we also see that many of the youth are moving from agriculture to service industry. So they will also want to kind of, live closer to urban centers, while those who are still engaged in agriculture will have a lot of land available for cultivation. Again, this second map also shows the kind of the major cities and the growth development corridors that the government is planning to concentrate development. So the roads, the water, the electricity, the government infrastructure, all of these will be prioritized in these growth corridors, development corridors that have been identified. For example, from Colombo to Trincomalee is a priority growth corridor, and we also know that at the moment Central Expressway is currently has been expedited. So there is a physical plan around which now we know that we need to organize ourselves with based on this particular plan. This is of course there till 2050. So we are in 2020. So for 30 years ahead, the plan kind of forecasts and prepares us. So this larger physical plan has also got input from other studies and research that have been done before. For example, earlier in 2009, during that period till around 2012, the government had done a extensive study in the northern province, looking at the environmental and social aspects, and having a more of a landscape, like a master plan, landscape plan for the northern province. Similarly, we've also had the megapolis, the regional master plan as well, looking at the larger western province and larger agglomeration here. And then there's also been the strategic cities development program, looking at Trincomalee, Hambantota, Kandy, likewise certain strategic cities where again the government plans to have improvements in the physical infrastructure. Now beyond the landscape, when you come, there's also regulation on the project level. So if you look at a building, I'm having a new industrial building coming up, or a new tourist property coming up. There are environmental and initial environmental examinations that might be required depending on the strategic environmental assessment that have been done. And then once the property once the construction is completed, there's also the environmental protection license, which also requires a certain environmental management plan and details there. And we are also seeing that Sri Lanka will soon be introducing energy efficient building code, which requires all buildings above 1,000 square meter floor area, and the energy consumption and AC consumption to have certain requirements in how the buildings are, the energy efficiency has to be integrated into the building. So this is a mandate, will be becoming mandatory for businesses to look at how they have to improve on energy efficiency in their buildings. On the another good kind of development is that the national spatial data infrastructure, this has been, I think the work has been ongoing for some time, but I mean, most of the information that relates to urban planning can also be accessed through the platform, and this provides a lot of help to people in the building, the real estate sector, as well as the people who are in the finance sector, to kind of look at because we also look at, when we are providing loans, we look at has the properties really looked at the urban designs. So this kind of information will also help banks, which we are hoping to integrate these kind of things into our review process. It will help us to also work with the real estate and the home buyers to make sure that the country's development happens based on the physical plan that has been approved by the government. So when you look at the physical plan, on the one hand, you get the public infrastructure, that is the roads, the railway, water, energy, all that, the shared infrastructure that the government provides. And then we have the private infrastructure in terms of residential. It could be single unit, or it could be condominiums. Again, on the other side, there is commercial buildings, industrial buildings. So the physical plan kind of also provides for evolution of these two areas, on how what kind of growth it expects, and in that respect, to make all of this physical construction happen, resources need to be mobilized, and we need to therefore find money. We need to find financing to be able to go for this kind of physical constructions. So where can the money come from? So if you just look at a broader classification, the money is provided by can be provided by the government, or it can come from the private sector. The money can come from within Sri Lanka, from the savings that people make in banks, and investments that people make through different investment companies. The money can be raised locally, or it can be raised internationally from other countries. The savings and investments that people from other countries make, where we are able to gain the benefit of their saving for infrastructure growth here. And then on the government can look at its government revenue in terms of taxes to kind of finance it, and then also debt, and then even both private sector and government can look at debt, equity, and other means of finance. I will go into each of these aspects later on, so I'm not going to be getting too much right now on this area, but I will go into each aspect in my speech. So what is the government's infrastructure outlook? I mean, this is again something that I had put together based on looking at the vistas of prosperity and splendor. As you know, our current president was also the secretary for urban development in the prior regime. So this area is closer to his heart, and the ministers that have been appointed, the relevant minister is the prime minister, and then you've also seen the state minister who's been brought in with a lot of skills to develop this area. So if you look at the government's priority areas, you see that one of the aspects is the strategic investments, where the government hopes to kind of increase the country's uh, revenue, foreign revenue earning capacity, and also save on major government spending for future by infrastructure. So Colombo Port City, the Colombo Port East Container Terminal, the expressways. These are some of the, I'm not going to go into each one, but 100% coverage of water supply. And this government is also quite keen on ICT and digital economy, integrating that into physical infrastructure as well. So there is quite a push in that area on strategic investments. Then you see also the urban regeneration plan. Again, this had been there from 2011 when President Gotabaya was then the urban development secretary. And so there has been a push to, have more middle income and low income housing, and releasing. The statistics was in 2011. There were 68,000 houses in 1,500 communities in Colombo, which were in low income housing in slums. So the idea is to enable those people to go for more vertical structures like condominiums, and free up the space for public parks, and also for and public users, as well as for other commercial development. So this has been happening throughout, even in the previous regime, where again there was focus on construction and middle income housing. So now we can expect that to happen again. Recently, the government had announced that they're going to be constructing 40,000 housing units for low income communities in Colombo. So the work has already started in Colombo 14 recently. Then on the other side, we see that apart from the urban sector, there's also government push to revive the regional economy. The government is trying to support entrepreneurs to value add to different in agriculture, in manufacturing. The government is trying to support the SMEs, and so where we will with this we will also see then the kind of infrastructure needed for value addition and value retention. Like for example, in agriculture, the processing facilities, the cold storage and cold chains, and other allied infrastructure that is needed for those industries to prosper will need to be put up, and then therefore the developers will also have to come in and support building of warehouses and other logistics in the regional areas. And then also there's a push for this was very much prevalent with the previous regime under Mr. Premadasa, where there's a push for low-income housing in the regions, and this with the there's also been support from Indian government where funding has come in. So we see that again there might be with the COVID-19 subsiding, that the government might also support housing in regional areas, especially as the vision statement of President says, he hopes to bring together the agricultural community into housing schemes, so that the land is better utilized also for agriculture in that regard. So in most countries, what we see is that infrastructure spending on roads, spending on these housing is done to get the economy going as a stimulus. But in Sri Lanka, the question is, does the government have the capacity to provide a stimulus like this? If you look at the government's fiscal status, normally government spends about $3 billion annually. That's about 4% of our GDP on capex, which is on capital expenditure, which is also to do with the physical infrastructure. And this comes from when we have a tax base of about tax revenue of about 9.7 billion. So we've always had a government spending on infrastructure, but the tax collection is not in keeping with the kind of money that is needed, and the government has had to right throughout had to borrow to fund the deficit. And this year, with COVID-19 having impacted us, and just before COVID-19 came in, government had provided certain, in hope of reviving the economy, the government had reduced taxes. So with COVID coming in now, with the businesses under huge stress, and the government having to rescue the economy, there will be less money available for the government. And now it is expected that this year the government budget deficit will exceed 8.5% of GDP. So at the moment, we are something that is already spoken about is that our government total government debt to GDP is very high. It's about 86.8% of GDP, and nearly about 42% of this debt is to foreign sources. So it has come from abroad, and we need to pay that money back in foreign currency. And the thing is, our foreign currencies are at a real stress, and because over the next year, it is expected that $5.6 billion will be needed to service the debt payments that we have to make the next year. And the government has therefore tried to save the foreign exchange by having import controls. So I think this is not new. You all must be knowing this. So then what we can see is that even though the government wants to have all of those development projects coming in, the government might not have the money to do have all that physical infrastructure going. Then on the other side, what the government had tried to do before is, when the government can't finance it, the government has provided, gone into public-private partnership models, and also try to attract FDI. For example, the Port City, Colombo, the Tata housing project, they are to do with long-term leases of land and providing tax holidays for developers, so that they will spend on the infrastructure. In the case of Tata housing, we've seen that they built a housing condominiums for low-income persons from the community, and then they are about to start their own commercial development. But what we see is that in these public-private partnership models, in the first instance, the government's thought is not on the environmental sustainability. The government looks at probably on the economic aspect and the social aspect. But in terms of the environmental aspect, as well as certain social issues that are there in migrating people from low-income housing to condominiums, need to be studied more. And there could be much better efforts taken to integrate environmentally friendly design into this kind of low-income housing that the government is constructing right now. Because in the end, the people who are living there will have to bear the energy costs and the waste handling and all that. So if the buildings are designed properly, then the occupants will be able to save a share of their income from having to be spent on electricity and other utilities. The government has also gone into, apart from foreign partnership, the government has also gone into partnership models with the local construction companies. And now one of the things that the government has said is that in all of the national assets that it would work on public-private partnership model on, the government would want to hold 51% stake in those assets. So meaning that the private entities will not be able to have significant ownership stake in these new investments. There's also a really good positive development. The government has formed investment company in the form of Selendiva Investments, This, I think, is something similar to Temasek in Singapore, where the government hopes to, for some of its infrastructure projects, government-owned ones, to have access to get people from the capital market, the people who are investing in shares, come in and partner with the government on this kind of shared shared model on infrastructure. So this is a very positive model, and this will help to kind of infuse capital to the government, so the government can take on other infrastructure projects as well. Now, the thing is, even though government has looked at all these other options that we are talking about, I believe the government has not significantly looked at the climate finance and sustainable finance flows. I don't know whether all of you are aware, but globally, we are faced with a climate emergency, climate crisis, and where we are increasingly feeling this in Sri Lanka, where we've had excessive floods and droughts in alternative periods, floods in the western, southwest areas, and then in prolonged drought in northern areas. So we are increasingly feeling the effects of climate change, and Sri Lanka is seen as one of the countries in the German in the climate watch in the risk index. Sri Lanka was ranked number 2 in terms of climate vulnerability in 2018 and 19. So the consistent message is that Sri Lanka and the countries in South Asia and Southeast Asia are at increasing risk of having to bear losses from climate change, and we need to start to adapt to our infrastructure, our housing, to be able to withstand these kind of changes that is happening in the climate. And because much of the emissions and pollution in terms of GHG gases has happened in the developed countries, and because there is also a lot of people who are living in poverty in developing countries, aspiring to better life, quality of life, there has been a differentiated responsibility. So there is expectation that the developed countries, like those in the European Union, US, and the other OECD countries, to provide financing for developing countries, so they don't have to go the same route that those developed economies took, but we can take a route which is more environmentally sustainable. We could have buildings which are not as energy guzzling as some of the buildings that were initially built in the developed world. They can have more environment friendly buildings. So there is a push to have more money coming from the developed countries to developing countries to help them with their infrastructure, to help improve their infrastructure, but do it in a more sustainable way, where the infrastructure is more in keeping with nature, and it also reduces the climate both climate as well as biodiversity impacts. So in that respect, now, for example, the European Union had in 2018 allocated 21.7 billion euros for climate finance, and some of this money could have also come to Sri Lanka had we been ready, had we kind of been able to come up with proposals. We could have also tapped into this kind of money that is available in developed countries. And there's also these developed countries are also funding these other large funds. The Global Environmental Facility is a UN facilitated facility which provides financing for governments and for international organizations to make improvements in different countries on climate related infrastructure, nature-based solutions, and so on. And the Green Climate Fund is actually working with the private, is geared for the private sector So I know that there might be a lot of construction companies or owners who might be listening to this. So if your company is having a larger pipeline of projects coming up which are more environmentally friendly, having in mind the climate mitigation and adaptation aspects, then your company could also tap into this green climate fund. The Ministry of Environment is a national designated authority, but if you country, there are many organizations who are already kind of able to play a facilitating role. For example, UNDP and IFC are organizations that could help you to tap into this green climate fund. And there are other banks also at the moment getting accreditation, so that if you want to get better grant and better terms, then we can put together proposals, and those proposals can be submitted. Only thing is, from our experience, it seems that it takes a bit of time for this, for funding to get reviewed and approved, because it requires a lot of changes from our end. So it might not be as easy to tap into these funds as you would want to. Then now the idea is that these foreign governments, developed country governments, are providing some grant and some aid and some funding, but what they are trying to do is, the developed country, the private sector has a lot of money. Globally, the international financial sector market is valued at 268.8 trillion as of 2018, and of that, nearly 30.7 trillion were in investments that were qualified as sustainable or responsible investment. So even investment made in green buildings, in green infrastructure, qualifies under this area. And therefore, now you can see that globally, there's so much of money that is available for projects that take on the green, which are incorporating environmentally friendly and more socially inclusive infrastructure. Now, I was mentioning earlier that Sri Lankan government, because of the high external debt that we have, we might not have enough money to spend on the infrastructure. And when you look at now the president's manifesto, the vistas of prosperity and splendor, some of the areas that the government hopes to also improve on the environment, on the sustainable built environment, is to have urban forests, water gardens and wetlands, and green belts around the highways. And then the government also wants to have a park and ride system, so that there's so much of congestion on the Colombo roads. So the government hopes to have a park where the people can, coming into Colombo, can park their vehicle and take public commute from there on. And so that is also something that in the agenda. And then there are also waste management and natural stormwater retention and recycling. There are other, in the physical plan, there are other things that have been identified. And the thing is, since the government is unable to, is restricted in terms of financing, one of the areas that it can look at is to go for what you call this debt for nature swaps. So what that means is that now, for example, Sri Lanka has about 10 to 14% debt to China, similar amount to Japan, and about again less than 10% to India, ADB, and there's also debt to World Bank Group. So now we are expected to, pay interest on the debt that we have taken from these countries and entities. And what the government could do is, anyway, since it's planning on having these kind of green belts and park and ride systems going, what the government could do is the government could request the donors to to forgive some of the debt or the debt service payments. so that the money that would go to those countries could instead be used to finance these kind of nature-based solutions, the natural stormwater retention, waste management solutions, and so on. So the only thing is you can't, like from the past experience, like these debt providers don't normally waive all of the, they don't waive significant amount of debt. It's only a small portion that normally you can get. So probably about 50 million US dollars, the government could probably negotiate and try to have this kind of investments where we can green our cities and have more natural wetlands and water gardens within the urban landscapes. So that is an option that the government could look into because of its debt position right now. And then another area that the government could look at is in terms of the green bonds or blue bonds or social bonds or sustainability bonds. I will kind of go into a bit detail later on, so I won't go into the nitty-gritties right now. But an important thing is that much of the government's current external debt, foreign debt, is held in terms of it's through international sovereign bonds. So now these are on very high commercial terms, and but since the government didn't have much option when the government tried to revolve these bonds earlier in 2019, the government found that there isn't a lot of interest, and the issues went undersubscribed. So one of the things that the government could do is, instead of having going in the future for normal sovereign bonds, the government could look at tapping into this, as I mentioned, the green finance that is available. So they could go into what you call these green bonds. These green bonds, for example, we've seen in India, the Indian government, and as well as even the government of Fiji has gone and raised green bond, has raised a green bond and has raised financing that way, because at the moment there's a lot of investors who are looking to allocate their capital in environmentally friendly infrastructure projects, but there isn't there aren't proposals coming in. So then if the proposals are there, then there is many investors from abroad who would like to come in and invest. So the government therefore could identify some of the areas where the money that they are raising from abroad will be used for environmentally friendly and socially inclusive infrastructure and built environment, and they can come put together proposals. For example, I just want to give you a few examples. If the government is unable to, can't go through with the Japanese funding for LRT, or that's one of the key areas in Sri Lanka's energy issue is that we don't have sufficient renewable energy storage. So one of the things that the government could go for renewable, because the government, if Sri Lanka transitions into renewables, we can save much of the foreign exchange that is being sent out for fossil fuel imports. So as a priority basis, if the government can finance this energy storage solutions, like for example pumped hydro energy storage, then the amount of money that is going out of the country can be saved, and we can also have better energy security. So again, we hopefully with the new state minister on money market and capital market, well aware of these kind of bonds that are out there, green bonds and sustainability bonds. Hopefully we would see that the government would go into this kind of financing tools. Another area that the government could, because since the government doesn't have money right now for infrastructure, but there might be companies and organizations who might already have money who can invest. So government can go for infrastructure projects on what we call a results-based financing model, or pay for success model. So how that happens is that the investor, or the in philanthropic body will go ahead and fund the infrastructure setup, and beyond the infrastructure, they are also required to have certain outcomes. Now, I think can be better explained through an example. Now with COVID-19, with school closures, one of the areas that people, our children can learn is through online learning and digital learning. But what we see is that there is a huge digital divide. I mean, most of the children who are living in rural areas are unable to access online digital learning. So the government could then get a private investor, or who's working on digital education, or a philanthropy, to come on to give them the guarantee that for them to go ahead and invest in setting up digital literacy labs in different parts of the country, and for them to also have the education facility provided. And when the children are when the facilities have been set up and the education outcomes are achieved, then the government will reimburse the company with the profit. The profit will depend on the outcomes that have been achieved. I'm not sure whether you got the concept, but I would again encourage you to, if you don't get the concept, I would encourage you to have a look at, go through this on your leisure time to read about these options. Another area is again on mangrove planting. We've experienced a tsunami, and there are other tidal waves and other things that can impact our coastal populations and the tourist establishments. And another area where results-based financing can come in is in terms of like mangrove planting and other. So there can be parameters on biodiversity and losses and damages, and those can then there can be certain innovative models that can be structured. Another area is that actually in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, 2019 February, I had the opportunity to participate in this consultation where the China's Council on International Cooperation on Environment and Development, they had a stakeholder consultation at Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. And so what you see is that many of these donor countries, China, Japan, all of them are interested to fund more environmentally friendly green projects. But if our government, if our state doesn't if we don't ask for it, then they will just go ahead with what we propose. So therefore, there's a need for both the government as well as all the civil society organizations to lobby to get to make sure that the foreign investment that comes in is on a sustainable infrastructure. We know that the Colombo port city is now that they are going to be having really strict regulations on which ensures sustainability. And similarly, now in Hambantota port area, the industrial zone, we need to make sure that we lobby the government. And that's also apart from our government, we are also able to influence the Chinese policy by being engaged in these other organizations, initiatives that have been formed. One of the examples is the International Coalition for Green Development on the Belt and Road, which is facilitated by UNEP. So, and this is open to not only governments, but it's open to think tanks, including the Green Building Council, as well as even the banking sector. Sri Lanka banking sector can make representations, be involved in this dialogue. And we need to make sure that because there's significant amount of funding that will also come in the future from China. So we need to make sure that those infrastructure is done on a very on a state of the art, very good environmental friendly infrastructure rather than poor quality, very pollutive infrastructure. I believe, I mean, if we had negotiated properly, we could have had better outcomes, especially we got financing on the coal power plants and the other Keralapitiya power plant, Noracholi and Keralapitiya. So I think had we kind of approached it correctly, we could have probably gone for more cleaner sources of energy, and we could have had a better outcome. But it's not too late. We still can work with those foreign governments to kind of lobby and make sure that the investment that comes in is sustainable. So when you look at the private sector, I mean, after the Easter Sunday attack that happened in 2019, and now with the COVID-19 situation, what we are seeing is that there's a drop in tourism, and with COVID-19, companies are trying to reduce the harder and also try to work from home. They're trying to release some of the properties that they have earlier rented on, and there's also fall in retail customers going into retail malls and shops. So it is very, I mean, for property owner, for people who are renting out, property owners, they are increasingly seeing that their rent incomes are tightening, and also what has happened is that some of the real estate developers who had gone out for this major infrastructure with highly leveraged models, after the Easter Sunday attack, some of the service providers and construction companies found it difficult to manage their working capital, and we've seen that some of those companies have now they are unable to. Some of them have become insolvent. So so that is a concern, and especially in the banking sector, when you're lending, the working capital situation we want to help, but it is important that there has to be a proper pipeline of projects coming in. And then we are one of the other things that COVID-19 is that we are also seeing that due to import controls, the access to construction materials might be difficult, and we also, so with that, what we are thinking is that in the short term, the private infrastructure, the growth in new constructions might be a bit more sluggish. It might not, it might take a bit more time to pick up, but what we could expect is since Sri Lanka has managed the COVID-19 situation quite well, and since we are having a fast recovery, that our hotels and retail shops might have a earlier recovery than in other parts of the region, and therefore we might be able to see that for refurbish, like when the places are closed for longer period, there'll be investment needed for refurbishment and to make it ship shape again. So there will be somewhere down the line, there'll be investment needed for refurbishments. And in the mid to long term, what we're seeing is that I mean, what we've even before Easter Sunday attack, with the kind of political instability that we had in the country, even though a lot of property developers had anticipated that we would have huge increases in tourism and huge increases in foreign companies coming in, and the increased economic activity, it didn't pan out that way, and so as a result, the market was anyway there was an oversupply in the luxury upmarket segment, and we could see that some of the appetite from buyers was drying up, and then those a lot of companies had few issues in getting their stock sold, and so but now with COVID-19, with the construction slowing, and with the country having early recovery, and there is a lot, I think with how Sri Lanka has handled this COVID-19 situation, a lot of expats and diaspora are interested in Sri Lanka again. And so what we might see is that the current oversupply might be taken up by the increased interest by the expats and diaspora. And there's also that again another area of demand that we see might come up is the middle income condominiums in suburbs and cities, where it has, where there's quick access to highway network. And we also see, as I mentioned, the government has plans to improve the transport and logistics sector and the maritime sector to support the other value addition and manufacturing industry. So what we will see is that there will be a lot of new constructions happening in the industrial buildings, especially on, it can be on the warehousing, it can be on greenhouses or protected houses in agriculture. So we see that there will be and a lot of that kind of value addition and warehousing related investment. I think quite recently Access Engineering had gone on to build one of the largest warehousing facilities in South Asia. So I think that can be expected. That kind of growth can be expected in the future as well. And another area is actually one of the very positive things that has happened quite recently, as all of you might know, is that the real estate investment trust framework had been approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission and together with Colombo Stock Exchange. And soon the developers will have access to capital from the from stock market. So this will allow the developers to have a bit more, sell out. I mean, kind of, release some of the stock, some of that tied up capital in the building stock, and be able to invest in other property demands that might come up. Then also now in terms of the banking sector, when you're looking at it, the banking sector is at the moment, the appetite is to lend to premium and mid-income customers of developers who are currently well established. So that is the kind of appetite that is there. Banks are a bit wary of companies who are under working capital issues. Not just because of COVID-19, but the ones that have been in a tight situation before the Easter Sunday attack. So banks are a bit wary on that. So there might be less funding on that area. So now the private sector, that is the outlook. So there is going to be probably uptake in the industrial buildings and in value in manufacturing facilities and so on. But in the residential and the commercial segment, especially on the tourism related new construction, I believe will be sluggish. So now when it comes to the financial sector, we look at two areas in terms of funding. So one area is actually what you call changing finance. So we are looking at when I think this has been something, a practice that has been there for decades now. All banks, when we lend on infrastructure and large project finance related transactions, we look at the environmental and social impacts of those projects. For example, if a power plant, or let's say if a manufacturing facility or a new hotel is being built, then we will look at the kind of impact on how the company is managing their labor force properly, and their labor rights or human rights are infringed, or whether whether they have proper safeguards in terms of having waste or pollution control and waste management, whether whether it's in the particular construction whether it's impacting the biodiversity. So in that respect, or in, I was mentioning earlier about the government, the physical plan and the master plans and the EIA and the EPL processes. So the banking sector will the banking sector uses something called the IFC performance standards and equator principles. Again, for your interest, I'm not going to go to detail on these two areas, but if you just want to understand what banks look at when they're funding infrastructure projects and construction projects, if you have not already heard or read about it, I would encourage you to read up on IFC performance standards and the equator principles, and also have a good knowledge of the country's physical plan and the environmental regulation, because banks are, when we are funding large infrastructure projects, we will fund looking at those environmental and social impacts that the developers are making, and then we only lend if we are sure that there's sufficient comfort that the management has put in proper controls to make sure that there isn't environmental pollution and infringement of rights of people. So that's on the environmental and social risk aspect. Apart from the risk management, the banks are also looking to kind of finance the achievement of sustainable development goals. Again, I'm not going to be spending too much time, but I think sustainable development goals has now become, a lot of people are aware of what the goals are, and what the 169 targets, and there is not only the banks, but all governments, private sector, we all need to strive to achieve these kind of quality of life improvements in with these goals. So the banks are also banks favor projects which are making an impact on these sustainable development goals. So in your proposals, if you're a project developer or a construction company, or if you are architects or civil engineers, if your proposals, if your financing mentions about the kind of benefits that a particular construction or a project will have on the sustainable development goals, if the linkages can be brought in, then the financiers will have a better appetite to lend to you. So that is another area that you could probably look at. And another developing area is that many of the banks are expected to now look at their finance portfolio and mention about how much of emissions are happening in their portfolio. So for example, if Nations Trust Bank is financing so many, let's say larger companies like Tata or whatever, Naga or whatever, we need to understand the emissions impacts, and we need to understand how, with the kind of changing legislation and changing and the kind of physical damage that can happen, we need to understand what the climate risks are in our investments. So again, this is something that if you have not heard about TCFD, and I would encourage you to read up on this, because again, this is an area where in terms of financing, when you're lending money to developers, construction companies, and other project proponents, we would want them to have kind of also have proper reporting and disclosure on climate related risk. So they'll have to understand how changes in the climate will impact their business model. In Sri Lanka, in terms of sustainable development, we've had a larger vision which was kind of codified by a presidential expert committee called Sustainable Sri Lanka 2030 Vision and Strategic Path. And so it has identified kind of how the trajectory that we should take, a balanced, inclusive green growth strategy that we should take on different industry segments. And in order to finance this vision, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka has come up with a roadmap. So this roadmap kind of provides guidance to banks, to finance companies, to the stock exchange, and to all the financial sector participants. The roadmap kind of tells what kind of gives a guidance on what the financing industry must do. So this guidance asks banks to come up with products that help the economy move into more green economic transition. So green buildings, green infrastructure, the banking sector and the capital market and all the financial sector is expected to come up with new product propositions. And within the bank, so even before central bank came up with the roadmap, in the banking sector, there was a coalition called Sustainable Banking Initiative. And at the moment, these banks, what you see in the left, there are 21 banks who are part of this initiative called Sustainable Banking Initiative. And they right now account for about 90% of the banking sector assets. So all of the major banks in Sri Lanka are members of this initiative. And what it means is that now earlier, a project developer could assume, let's say, could go to one bank. Let's assume that they could go to a nation's trust bank. And now if we might, looking at the environmental and social impacts of that project, we might ask the developer to make changes to the, looking at the environmental program and the kind of country's environmental laws, we might say that we in order for us to finance your development, you will need to make certain changes, or otherwise we are unable to finance you. But what earlier happened was that when one bank takes a stance like that, developer could go to another bank and obtain financing. So this has happened in the case of mini hydro developments, where the mini hydro developers had had raised money from one bank when the other banks had refused to fund them because of the environmental concerns. And what happened was there was huge public outcry and protest. And then the developer, once certain work had already been undertaken, had to stop that development. So then therefore the developer was couldn't pay back the loans, and the bank's lending also got affected. So therefore, like, when most banks have now come together, these 21 banks have come together to share information and in sense make sure that project developers who are doing significant damage to the environment and society, they don't find shortcuts, and they don't there isn't the banks don't undercut each other on this area. And the banks are also trying to promote renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and also green buildings in other areas, and also trying to promote financial inclusion and trying to make sure that low-income persons have access to affordable housing and allied services. So some of the things that the private sector can look at in terms of sustainable finance is on one of the there's a real estate investment trust that has in a framework that has been approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission. But a new product that can be added to this is a green real estate investment. So what that means is that the REIT has in its portfolio, in the kind of buildings space that it has, it has a large share of green buildings in the net leasable area or the revenue in its portfolio. So one of the suggestions that I would like to make to Green Building Council and any other think tanks operating in this area is to work with the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Colombo Stock Exchange, and to promote green REITs, and which can then lead to other maturity of other the financial sector to include green asset-backed securities as well as green exchange-traded funds. But since the REITs are now taking off, it would be a good opportunity for Green Building Council and other developer associations to work with the SEC to kind of have this kind of new product line where it is favoring the developers on green buildings, where you can get better terms of financing. Another area that I think there's significant potential is on the energy attribute certifications. In the audience, there might be people who are involved in power projects, in renewable energy projects, and you might be wanting to get additional source of income to be able to finance more renewable energy projects. So this instrument called energy attribute certifications, what it does is that, for example, Nations Trust Bank, we had set a target to achieve 25% of our energy consumption coming from renewable energy. But what we found is that in most of our buildings, our rooftop space doesn't allow for large solar rooftop installations. And we don't also have much wind energy potential in our branch spaces. So there is only a level to which we can generate renewable energy at the particular branch or a office. So if you want to really be able to kind of account to having more renewable energy being sourced for our consumption, then the way to go about is to kind of buy credits, buy energy credits, renewable energy credits from developers. So the developer will be paid certain amount of money by the companies who are interested in having their energy consumption sourced from renewable energy. So there has to be a middle party who's kind of verifying that the project developer has generated renewable energy, and kind of gives a validation to the company that you have set off your energy consumption. So at the moment, this is done in India and other countries. Again, I would like to propose to Sustainable Energy Authority, the Green Building Council, and SLEMA and NCPC and other bodies who are involved in this area. This is actually a very good proposition, which I think we can try out in Sri Lanka. So I would again, if there's people in the audience who can kind of voice this and kind of get this policy going, I would encourage you to read up on these energy attribute certifications and try to promote it and advocate for it. Other ways of financing, this is again energy service company or ESCO models and cooling as service. These are models of performance contracting. I know you all, since you are in the construction industry or service provider industry, you must be very well aware of this. But this is that if a private company is unable to go for a certain building improvement or a service, then the consulting company can go ahead and fund it and earn profit, or the revenue from the energy savings or savings that they make for that company, and get paid that way. So the service company, ESCO companies can then once they have a sufficient large portfolio, they can then go for bank financing or the capital market financing to cover their investments. Another area is the green mortgages. I'm not going to go in detail into this because Matthew will be speaking on that area. But green mortgages is where I'll let Matthew talk about it. I don't want to take up his time. And another area is the sustainability linked loans. So what happens is, like, sometimes some of the companies design very high rated green buildings. It might be green building, LEED Gold, or it can even be Green Building Council Sri Lanka rating. A high rating can be obtained by a company for their building. But in the end, once a building is occupied, the culture and the people might not use the design to the best effect. So even though the building is green, the consumption is not properly adjusted. So the sustainability linked loans are a way where financiers can make sure that so the product is such that it's not on the design of a building or those features, but it's given to a company based on proposed targets for performance. For example, a company might say we need 10 million rupees, sorry, 100 million rupees for a certain energy, and so then the bank might give a loan, but the rates, if a company who's borrowing achieves a certain, like, after the building the improvement has been made, if the company is able to keep the targets, the energy reductions, and keep the energy reductions going, then the banks could reduce the interest rate based on the performance. So like the electricity, the parameters could be GHG emissions, it could be water consumption, so waste recycling rates. So like that, a company can partner with banks to go for sustainability linked loans where their performance on sustainability will be rewarded. Another area is on green leases. This is where this is like a normal commercial lease, but the difference is that the improvements, there might be certain improvements that need to be made to the building on sustainability, on green building retrofits. So either the owner or the tenant could undertake the investment and have the, so in the agreement have an arrangement where one party reimburses the other. For example, I want to give an example from our bank. Nations Trust Bank, we have 96 branches, and most of the branches, about 90 odd, are under lease. So so now we wanted to make sure that we wanted to go for rooftop solar in the buildings that we are renting. So what we kind of offer to the building owners is that if they come up, if they put solar panels on the rooftop of branches, then we agree to pay the amount that we had earlier paid to CEB. We agree to pay it to the building owner, and we were also willing to provide a loan to the soft loan at 8% for the building owner to put up the rooftop solar, and make it so that the loan installment and the energy, the renewable energy generated are equal, so that the property owner doesn't have to pay anything from their hand. And after 7 years, the property owner makes pure profit, because we would continue to pay the property owner what we paid for CEB, so the property owner can make an additional income in this kind of arrangement. So green leases are another way where building improvements on green building improvements can be financed. I was talking about green bonds and climate bonds. So I was only talking about buildings, but there are, if you are a developer or a consulting construction properties, then I would encourage all of you to look at the climate bonds initiative, where you can go for green bonds. There is potential to raise money in all of these different areas. It can be on energy, it can be on solar, wind, bioenergy, or other projects that you're developing. It can be on transport, or it can be on water infrastructure, it can be on residential and commercial. So as you can see on the right hand side, you can go for I've given you the kind of framework that Climate Bond Initiative looks at when they're financing residential and commercial buildings on green bonds. So likewise, I think my time is running out, so I don't want to take much time, but just to say that there is something called green bonds, and these green bonds have a criteria where the money that you are raising through the bond has to be spent on projects projects which are having certain environmental parameters. So therefore, I would encourage you to look at this option when you're looking at raising finance for your construction projects. The banking sector at the moment, our Nations Trust Bank, we're trying to work with the banking sector and some of the other parties to form what you call a blended finance facility. So what we're trying to do is, a lot of people want to have favorable rates, favorable loan conditions. But with the kind of, we still have to make sure that we pay our depositors back. We need to make sure that we pay our shareholders back. So there isn't much room for banks to really play around with in terms of rates and the facilities. So what we are trying to do is form a blended finance facility where some of the donors, for example, European Union has already kind of agreed to come on board with us, where they would provide some grant and some risk sharing benefits. So then, in essence, what this means is that banks would be able to fund at a provide better rates of finance for project developers, and then we need to have, in this kind of structure, we need to have organizations that are providing the capacity for developers as well as building owners. So, for example, Green Building Council and National Clean Production Center, or SLAMA, can play a huge role in readying the real estate and construction sector to prepare proposals that can then be financed through this upcoming facility that we are trying to form, where we will hopefully be able to offer better terms to the construction sector. So now I know that there are architects, there are academia, there might be people from building trade community. So there is a role that all of us has to play, because the thing is, for you to be able to have better quality, environmentally friendly and socially more friendly infrastructure going, we need to have home buyers, our customers, who are aware of the benefits. So we need to have be able to educate them on the benefits. And in order for us to kind of understand what the benefits are, there has to be sufficient research, baseline studies, and proper research and academic research done. So therefore, if you are in the academia, your work is very important to be able to build policy and awareness cases on energy efficient buildings and building retrofits. And if you are in architects or consultants, it's important that you canvas to the clients, you propose to the clients to have innovative designs that really integrate environment friendly features, but it should not come at it should not price out people. So it has to be affordable housing. One of the suggestions that I could also make is that for people who are unable to afford an architect, maybe the Green Building Council or an entity can have like few models of houses which are depending on the orientation it can change, but have low cost housing architectural plans where people who are unable to afford professional services can then maybe the banks can partner and finance some of the architects who come up with proposals of this nature, so that we can make sure that, because not everybody is able to afford the architects, and we can't have those affordable housing being built in a haphazard way. So if we can have a design competition and have housing which which are more environment friendly, and banks then can finance buildings that have been built on those models. And also, I think there's a role that certainly financial institutions must make. And we want to hear from you about the kind of challenges that you are having and where financing is needed. You need to have government code, the urban council, the local government, UDA, and especially the real estate developers, because you guys have a huge responsibility. I want to remind you of the first picture that I showed you of Dhaka. We all want to do economically well, but at the same time, we are living in Sri Lanka. We are living in these communities. So if our environment becomes unlivable, then however much money we make in the short term, in the long term, our life quality of our life might not be great. So it's important that we all work together and try to finance as much of the properties to be more greener and sustainable. So with that, I just want to, I mean, this is my uh, I think I might have overtaken my time. I want to invite Matthew to make his presentation. Matthew? Matthew?
Hi, can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yeah, hi Matthew, go ahead. I'm sorry, I think I might have taken a bit more time, but you can go ahead.
That's fine. That was a great presentation. And in particular, the last two slides that you showed are a great segue to some of the information that I want to present. So if you bear with me, I think I can share my screen and get my slides up. Is that visible?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I'm trying to get it, there we go. Okay, well, thank you. I was very happy to get the invitation to present from Adisha, and it's a pleasure to try to give all of you some information about some of the things that we're doing at UNFFI, the UN Environment Program Finance Initiative, in a program that we're really just getting started with to work with the finance community, in particular the banking sector in Sri Lanka, and try to support a market development activity for green finance, and in particular around mortgage finance or property finance. And just to give a bit of a background, I'm based in the United States, but the UN Environment Program Finance Initiative is a small secretariat, part of the overall UN Environment Program that is based in Geneva. And our mission is to work with the private finance sector globally. And that includes banks, investors, and insurers. We have more than 325 financial institutions around the world that participate in our programs and are active supporters. The majority of those are in the banking sector. I work principally with investors on property issues. And so this program that we're doing in Sri Lanka is really, to us, it's a great opportunity to bring together some of our work that has been traditionally focused on property investors and work more closely with the banking sector, and work through ways in which finance for green buildings can be increased, or the finance flow for green buildings can be increased. Generally speaking, there's a perception that developing green buildings costs more than, let's call them conventional buildings. The perception is that the costs are excessive oftentimes, or considerably higher than what would typically be the case for a construction budget for, again, a typical or a less green or a non-green building. The experience still suggests that there is a cost premium, and the likely range is somewhere from, it can be cost neutral. It can be as low as being the equivalent or 0% difference. But quite often it can increase the capital cost, and perhaps up to 10%. And so there's an inherent barrier or penalty to developing green buildings based on developer concern as to whether or not they will be able to recover and create a profit on that additional capital cost that needed to be spent to deliver the green building. There's lots of evidence from other parts of the world that developers of green buildings, owners of green buildings, and even occupiers of green buildings achieve benefits, or you can say that they receive financial gain from delivering and developing green buildings, and that can justify the higher costs associated with developing properties of that type. And so it might be that the buildings sell more quickly, or that you have tenants that are more likely to renew or to pay more in rent in the first instance. It might be that occupiers feel, because the buildings are healthier, they are actually healthier. I mean, so in other words, less for companies occupying green buildings, their employees have fewer sick days, things of that nature. So there are a range of benefits. There's been lots of research done as to what those benefits are and how to quantify those benefits. And so the evidence and the business case is pretty strong, but generally that business case or the evidence comes from mature economies. And so there is a challenge to try to do some of that research in parts of the world where the research base or the evidence base is thin. It's starting to change, and there is more evidence from other parts of the world. South Africa is one country where there has been quite a lot of research done as to what the benefits green buildings are, and the fact that developers and owners and occupiers have been able to create financial benefits from green buildings. But that is one of the challenges, and we hope that this work that we're about to undertake starts to provide some research and to provide some evidence that financial benefits can be achieved in markets like Sri Lanka. I won't go into the details of this image, but just generally speaking, there are a number of barriers that exist as to why green building construction lags behind typical or less green buildings, or there's not enough finance and attention given to energy efficiency investments. And the point of what we're trying to do when we talk about green finance and green mortgages is to create products that help overcome these barriers and address the fact that there often is higher capital cost or upfront expenditure that is required to deliver savings over a long term. And so particularly when it relates to energy efficiency, you can spend more money on improving the building fabric, on utilizing technologies and systems within the building, the mechanics of the building, on-site energy generation, that generate savings for the occupiers over a longer term, but there's a higher upfront cost associated with that. So a lot of what we tried to do is find ways in which those higher costs can be balanced by the savings and create finance products specifically suited to the local scenario. While we haven't come to a determination yet as to whether or not our focus will be on construction finance and mortgage finance, we think it's probably likely that it will focus on construction finance. And Adisha talked about having this facility available to lower the cost of capital, and so this blended finance. And so that, I think one of the strategies that we can use is that because you can reduce, hopefully, the cost of borrowing for a developer or a construction company that's putting up green buildings, they may spend more. Their capital budget may be slightly higher, and so therefore they need to take on a bit of extra debt to deliver those projects. But because their cost of financing is lower, they can, in effect, bring their product to the market for the same cost that it would be to deliver a less green product. And so that may be an approach that we're trying to do, but I think these slides will be available, and so anyone can look at this in more detail at a future time, and even reach out to me if there's questions. But the point is that there are a range of ways and approaches to reduce that upfront capital cost or penalty that developers face, and to deliver and monetize those long-term savings over time. So I won't go into details here, but the last slide that Adisha showed that there are a range of contributions that need to be made from all sorts of people up and down the value chain, and this is really getting the same point across, and that as we think about an appropriate approach to a market development activity to make green buildings seem more achievable and beneficial and make the financing available to do that, there are a series of steps that need to be undertaken. And there are lots of stakeholders that need to be involved in that process. And it does take time to develop. But it's important to determine the appropriate target market for the activity, find whether or not capital sources can be brought into that that will perhaps lower the cost of construction, as we've already spoken about. There need to be standards in place so that in capacity building undertaken, so that those that are underwriting loans have the knowledge and capacity to do that and to understand what the green benefits are. And then some sort of certification or rating system or verification system to determine whether or not those green benefits have actually been achieved. And there should be some evaluation. There needs to be data gathering. I mentioned that most of the evidence for green benefits comes from other parts of the world. Well, it's important that when green buildings are constructed in Sri Lanka, that there is some sort of tracking of that and some information that gets built up as to say whether or not those financial benefits have been achieved. Were higher sale prices, were developers able to achieve higher sales prices? Are those buildings leasing up more quickly? Do the occupiers feel that there are benefits to occupying buildings of that nature? And so it's a holistic process. We're really just trying to get things started, really probably on points 1 and 2 of this graphic, but we can set out some ideas for all of this work, and we hope that will be taken up by the banking sector and other stakeholders involved in construction markets. So just quickly, this is what we're trying to achieve and some of the questions that we're trying to answer through this initiative. And we're just getting our work started. It will be in progress for the next probably 12 to 15 months. I would say our progress has been hindered somewhat by, unfortunately, by the pandemic. We're not able to spend time in country as in ways that we hoped we would be able to do. And generally it has slowed our work down to some extent, but we're trying to work around that. And as I said, we have a plan to move forward. So principally what we're doing is for the benefit or to target the banking sector. And so we'll develop some knowledge resources that are drafted and written specifically for banks. We want to try to understand as to whether or not the capital markets can help drive the supply for green finance products. Is there interest amongst developers to construct green buildings, and therefore their investors? Do they have an interest in green construction? And can we also find sources of capital that banks can utilize to lend to these borrowers? So the blended finance facility that Adisha spoke about is one example of that. He also spoke about the very good work that's happening from the Sri Lankan Bankers Association, from the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and so forth. So whatever we do, we want to make sure is quite well integrated with that work that's already happening. And a lot of that work is quite impressive and has really set a remarkable foundation, I think, for developing green finance, not just for construction, but more broadly across the finance sector in Sri Lanka. We also want to do some research and answer the question and learn from consumers as to whether or not there's a willingness to pay higher for green buildings. Will the health benefits that might be hard to quantify, more difficult to quantify, for example, than energy savings, is there a willingness to pay to occupy buildings that utilize green materials and therefore are healthier for the occupiers? And then lastly, we want to know or investigate what market segments are the ones that we should target for some initial stakeholder engagement. Is it the tourism sector, for example, and hoteliers? Or is it middle and low income housing? And there are significant housing construction programs that are planned. Can those be vehicles through which we target green building practices and try to achieve a sense of scale? Just one point, going back to this question about the willingness to pay. there's a companion program that I have colleagues from the UN Environment Program working on with the National Clean Air Production Center that are looking at chemicals of concern in the construction industry. And so in particular, the material inputs to end products, so paints, adhesives, things of that nature. And it's very much connected to the Green Building Council's activities around certifying products and materials that are environmentally friendly or environmentally preferable. So while that work is happening in parallel, and an effort to try to reduce some of those chemicals in the supply chain, again, we want to make an effort to understand more about where there's a willingness to pay for greener, healthy materials. And so it's addressing both of the supply of green materials, but also the demand of green materials. And so those two programs connect up very well. And in fact, that was our, I guess that was the way we got involved in this project, or were brought to the project, is to complement the work that's happening on green construction materials. So I mentioned the fact that unfortunately we'll be spending less time in country than we anticipated, but even if we were able to travel in country, we know that we need the services of local consultants and those with very good knowledge of the local market conditions and stakeholders to support us in this process. And so we're finalizing an agreement with a local consultant who can do some research work for us to support this work. And I've just laid out there some of the research questions and steps that are involved in this program. And so this work will be unfolding over the next 6 to 8 months. And just quickly, we're relying on that local consultant to help us to identify some of the key stakeholders, whether those stakeholders come from the development community, the banking sector, lenders, and so forth, and then also investors in property. We want to know more about this consumer knowledge and demand and interest in green buildings. And I mentioned this willingness to pay for green buildings or healthy buildings. We want to know whether or not the market in Sri Lanka has recognized any premiums from green buildings. The number of green buildings and certified green buildings that have been constructed in Sri Lanka are a small but growing number, but we want to know, have developers achieved quicker sales or higher rents through those properties? We need to know more about the financing conditions and the access to lower cost capital and the interest in green investors in coming to the market, and also the interplay between the lending rates and some of the repayment periods. And so, for example, there's a bullet point there about understanding energy use profiles and costs. Energy efficiency achievements or reducing the expenditure on energy services is quite important. But when you're borrowing at high rates of interest to try to finance those improvements can be quite sensitive to interest rates, and those interest rates can affect the payback period. So we need to have a better understanding about how those interest rates will affect payback and whether or not that's still a compelling proposition for borrowers. And so on that basis, we do need to do some modeling of the costs and the benefits in the payback periods. And then ultimately, we want the advice of our local partner on the target markets that we should focus on. So just really in conclusion, as I said, we're just starting. I'm very happy I was able to receive this invitation and make this presentation, because this allows us to introduce the work at its early stage, and then knowing or being connected to many of you that are on the call, that we start to build up that base of potential stakeholders and interested parties in this work. And so hopefully this will be the start of an ongoing dialogue. When Adisha approached me, we also had a discussion as to whether or not someone from IFC, the International Financial Corporation, could participate in this call. And unfortunately, they were not able to do so. But IFC, if you're not aware, have a green building and certification program called EDGE, which targets specifically middle income in emerging markets globally. And the program has been in operation for quite some time, probably 10 years or more, and it's been quite successful. And if you're not familiar with it, I'd encourage you to go to these links and to learn more, and partly because they've built up a really significant knowledge base of case studies of developers and development projects that have been certified and what the benefits have been in terms of energy cost savings, water efficiency, carbon emission reductions, material savings, and so forth, and some of the financial benefits that have been achieved through that. And so they've got quite a range of resources, both in case studies of buildings, but also what are the business benefits or the financial benefits of green buildings. So if you're not familiar, I'd encourage you to look at any of those links that I've shown there. And so with that, I'll conclude. My contact details are there. I think they'll be shared with everyone, and I do encourage you to reach out. And I don't know, timing-wise, if we have time for questions or if those will be, perhaps dealt with offline. But I'm happy to hear from any of you today or another time. So thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. I know we have taken a lot of time, but if there are any questions, we can probably answer. If there any feedback or suggestions, any comments, please do share. Even now, or maybe even later on, you can message us or call us. One thing that I couldn't mention, I think, is that we are seeing that there are a lot of gated communities, like new housing schemes that are coming up, and probably we could also kind of lobby and get certain regulations where it allows for microgrids, installation of microgrids, where people can have solar and renewable options in their own communities, and they can connect rather than totally drawing from the national grid. So at the moment, I don't think the policy allows for that, but maybe for new constructions, for new gated communities, again, something that we could advocate for is on community level renewable energy generation, as well as there could be community farming and new concepts that we can explore in new gated communities that are coming up. So that's again a suggestion. Any questions you have, or any otherwise we can probably conclude. Situmini?
Yes, sir. I just received one question. So they wish to know about the conservation finance mechanism in Sri Lanka.
So conservation finance. Now, as I was talking about nature-based solutions, so those are some of the areas that we can go for. Only thing is, now there are few actors who are working on this. There's a party called Earth Restoration. So they are involved in conservation finance, and so what they do is they provide income to farmers from rural areas for them to plant trees, and the investors or whoever, the CSR, this is mostly done on a CSR basis, not on a profit basis, because unless it's a commercial plantation, like commercial agroforestry venture, there isn't a return that is there. So it is mostly done as a CSR venture, and so there are parties like Earth Restoration who ties up with the community, and then provides the CSR, like the companies who are interested in financing that, they provide the opportunity to on a long-term reforestation initiative. So that's on the reforestation aspect. But then there's also, and I know there's a program where, like for mini hydros, there is a payment for ecosystem services. I think a project, I'm not too familiar with it, but I think there is a attempt where, because the mini hydros depend on the water flow, and so then for them watershed development is important to maintain the water flow. So there is certain payment that the mini hydros should make, which will go to financing the green cover and watershed development in the like in catchment areas and upstream. So that's another thing I think that is going on. But most certainly there is a lot of room to improve, especially on nature-based solutions. But for that, there has to be innovative approaches taken by the government. So the one that I was talking about, the results-based financing, is I think one of the areas which can really unlock potential. So if the government, says to a private investor, we will reimburse you if you can kind of bring the biodiversity or the water, groundwater recharge or whatever the certain parameters. If the investor implements and delivers on the project results, then the government can finance. So up until that point, the government doesn't have to physically put in money. So there are, solutions like that, but we need. So it has to be a joint approach. We need to work with the government to do that. Matthew, do you have any in terms of other country experience where you think it can be applied to Sri Lanka on conservation finance?
I'm the wrong person to ask.
Okay.
So it's an area of it's an area that UNFFI is quite active in, but personally I'm not, and so I have a difficult time answering that. But I trust that there are many good examples. But in particular, it's an emerging area of interest.
Yeah, so I would recommend if there's anybody who's kind of interested in this model that one of the innovative finance companies have brought up, just check up Earth Restoration. I think they've got a really good model going. They're trying to have a blockchain solution where people like what you do is you pay for your we all consume oxygen, we all consume water, so they kind of value the oxygen and water that is generated from the reforestation program. So the companies who are willing to fund that, those gains can pay rural farmers for them to be involved in planting native species in the country. So that's a very very good model, and I think we also wanted to partner with them, but we for some reason we couldn't because of the current COVID-19. But their proposition is a very good proposition, and I would encourage all of you to have a look at that their model. But there are other models as well, other innovative models which are certainly possible in Sri Lanka. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and we have one more question. In Sri Lanka, are you providing green mortgage facility by banking sector? If yes, how do you assess the green building performance?
So at the moment, we are not offering a green mortgage. I think that's what Matthew and UNEP-FI, their proposition is to kind of work with the banking sector and see how we can go for one. But I think now Matthew mentioned about IFCH, but I think there's also potential for the Green Building Council of Sri Lanka also to play a role. I have seen in Romania, the Green Building Council work with the banking sector as well, and along with IFCH and other certificate lead other certification providers. And so it's a very interesting model what they have done in Romania. And again, I would maybe encourage those of you who are interested to look at that model. So to answer the question, at the moment we don't have a product. We are trying to go for it, and that's why we are working with Matthew and we are hoping to get the stakeholders together to see how we can go for structure one. At the moment, when we had looked at the commercial viability before, but we realized that unless we get some sort of blended finance, that is some sort of subsidization at the beginning, with the kind of save the deposit rates that we had to pay out to saving customers, and the amount of dividends that we had to pay to our shareholders, we are unable to provide huge reductions in rate. But what we could alternatively do is we can provide credit enhancement. So for example, if you are based on your income profile, you might qualify for 10 million rupees. But if you if you are integrating green building features into your building design, then we can kind of assume we can look at with those features coming in, we can calculate the savings that comes. So then we can assume then therefore you will have better capacity to pay the loan, because unlike in a normal building, this building will save you money. So we might be able to give, if you are able to only give you 10 million with your credit profile before, we might be able to offer you more in loan amount. So we might be able to give you maybe 15 million. So just to give you example, at the moment we are unable to do much with the rate, but we are able to provide a credit enhancement. But we are trying now to look for blended finance opportunities where we can also give you a rate advantage as well. So that's just to answer that question. Matthew, do you want to add to that?
No, really, just quickly to say that, I mean, having a standard in place is important, and it can be a range of things. And so there's the green building certification available from the Green Building Council in Sri Lanka. And so that's a possibility, using EDGE, using some of the international tools like LEED and BREEAM. The important thing is just to have a defined standard and then a level of transparency, so that when the bank is underwriting the loan, they know what the requirement is, that's being put upon the developer, and then the those on the design team, the construction side, and so forth, are all working toward the same goal. And then it's something that can be checked or certified post construction. So a lot of times, if there is for example, concession on the interest rate, that interest rate reduction may not be put in place until the achievement has been verified. So I guess the specific tool is not as important as it is to make sure that there is a rigorous process and system in place with a certification or a tool identified, and a level of transparency around that. And you'll find that that's the case in other countries where they do have green loans and green finance programs.
So if you have any more questions, we can direct them.
I think it's important that we all work together, and probably it's great that we have had an opportunity to talk to diverse audience. And I think there was people from the civil engineering and architecture background. And I mean, we certainly value your expertise and your insight. And there's, I think, a lot that we can also learn. I mean, we were talking from the perspective of, I was talking from the perspective of the financial industry and with whatever knowledge that I'm aware of, but there's certainly a lot that we need to learn from you as well, and be able to understand all sides so that we can come up with the products that are suitable for the market. So hopefully we all can stay engaged and we can share our experience. Maybe Situmini, you can share my contact details as well. Maybe if Matthew is okay, you can share Matthew's details as well. And if anyone's interested, you can please reach out to us, and we will see how we can collaborate.
Yeah, I'm sure I will share your contacts if they need it. So there are no more questions. We can wind up the session. So I would like to thank Mr. Alisha Pereira and Mr. Matthew Altinero on behalf of Green Building Council of Sri Lanka. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you.